Simon, thank you. That's Simon Marks there. Now, how is the Israeli government and the Israeli people and indeed Israeli media responding to all of this? James Marlow is a journalist and security analyst who joins us from Jerusalem. James, good evening to you. Are the Israeli media, Israeli politicians even aware of what the British Labour Party or the Scottish National Party are debating about the future of the Israel-Gaza war? Does it even feature?
Good evening, Iain. It's good to be with you this evening. Yes, of course, they're aware of what world opinion is. If I may just start by just picking up something on what Simon has just said, in particular to quote the US Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, because we were just watching the evening news here. The evening news comes on at 8 p.m. here in Israel, channels 11, 12, 13 and 14. And specifically, although Simon did say this, it's a temporary ceasefire based on the release of all hostages. That's what the Americans are talking about, plus the full condemnation of Hamas, the terror group, plus it's also adding to highlight the sexual violence that Hamas and its co-workers, Islamic Jihad and all the other groups that came across, to highlight the sexual violence on October the 7th. And it's very important to stress that, because the American ambassador is stressing that, because there has not been a condemnation of Hamas since October the 7th. Now, from an Israeli point of view, what you're dealing with over here is Israelis still traumatized on what happened on October the 7th. And there are many European leaders, and I was listening to one yesterday, which was picked up, I think the foreign minister of Luxembourg was at the Munich Security Summit over the weekend, where a number of leaders from across Europe and the world were there. And what he said was that really now, for Israel to claim that its defense, because October the 7th, I'm paraphrasing what he said, because October the 7th was some time ago. In fact, it was actually 137 days ago, which is about 4.5 months. Because it was such a long time, Israel could no longer claim that it is acting in its defense. But of course, from Israel's point of view, it still has to deal with 4 major battalions in a place called Rafah, the largest city in the south of Gaza. And inside of Rafah, there is the Hamas stronghold, possibly the leadership, with 136 Israeli hostages. Excuse me, it's now 132, of which at least 32 have been executed. And no one seems to be, or very few people around the world, again, I'm speaking from an Israeli point of view, seems to be highlighting these 132 hostages. And if I can just add one more...
No, well, just before you do, I think that's slightly unfair, because if you look at the wording of the motions that are going down at the House of Commons tomorrow, so I haven't seen the SNP one, but the Labour one certainly does highlight the position of the hostages, and it's something that I think most programmes on the British media do highlight. But I think you're right in the sense that, if we want to send a little message to the Foreign Minister of Luxembourg, whatever his name is, he should remember that Hamas have actually threatened to repeat October the 7th many times in the future. So whatever action Israel is taking now is presumably, it can be defended on the basis of that threat.
Well, there's that. His name is Javier Vital, if you get the opportunity to speak with him, Ian. But yes, there is that. There's also the fact that you have around 300,000 Israelis who've been evacuated from their homes in the south and, of course, in the north. I know this discussion is not about the Lebanese border, but that also applies. You've got a major security issue in Israel. And also what Simon mentioned was against the Netanyahu government, and some have actually said the far-right Netanyahu government. It's actually only 6 seats of the Otzma Yehudit, the Jewish Power Party, out of the 64 seats. But nevertheless, I have to tell you, Ian, and to your listeners, that this opinion, this policy is actually almost right across the spectrum inside of Israel. There is no question marks about what the opposition is saying. The opposition is saying that Hamas have to be destroyed, and the 132 hostages have to be returned, and Hamas can no longer have a place inside of Gaza. And there is no negotiation on that from the Israeli point of view. And they feel so strongly about it. So
no,
strongly.
I understand all of that. And I think, again, to be fair to the Labour Party, a lot of the things that you've just said are reflected in the motion that they've put down in the Commons to be voted on tomorrow, or presumably to be voted on. However, is there a recognition in Israel among the people, among the media, among the government, among politicians in general, that Israel is losing the propaganda war here, that the world in general thinks that Israel has gone too far, does not want it to mount a ground offensive in Rafah, and if it does, it will lose all international support that it's enjoyed maybe up to now?
Look, I can only speak from my point of view and from a journalistic point of view, not on behalf of the Israeli government, but I can say that I believe that Israel has many, many friends inside the House of Commons, inside the House of Lords, certainly in the United States and around the world. Of course, you're hearing very loud voices. When it comes to the media war as such, or the social media propaganda, if you like, Israel, just like in the United Nations, doesn't stand a chance. You know, when it comes to United Nations votes, you have, let me see if I can remember this, because I haven't said this for a long time, 22 Arab states. You've got 57 Islamic states. You've got all those countries that vote with the Arabs. It doesn't stand a chance in the United Nations, and it certainly doesn't stand...
I get all of that, but my point is that Israel in general, and possibly this Israeli government in particular, this Prime Minister in particular, makes it very difficult for those of us who do support Israel and want to support Israel to stand by some of the things that Israel has done over the past couple of months or so.
But Ian, Benny Gantz made a statement just a couple of nights ago. He said exactly the same thing that Netanyahu has been saying. Yes, as you probably know, Israeli politics, and it was certainly very divisive before October the 7th, as you probably know. But Benny Gantz is saying that the Hamas has to be destroyed, that Israeli troops will have to go into Rafah. The final 4 battalions inside of Rafah, and by the way, there's 2 more in Han Yunis, where there's still heavy fighting taking place. Israel is losing many, many soldiers, unfortunately, inside of Gaza. It's a war that Israel didn't want. It's a war that Israel didn't expect. But it's a war that cannot continue again in 6 months' time or a year's time. And to quote the UN ambassador, she actually said, if we actually call for a forced ceasefire right now, then we're back to square one, because Hamas will suddenly come back into power. They will oppress the people inside of Gaza itself, and they will attack again, as you rightly said beforehand. This has to be sorted out right now. And I just finally, if I may say, I'll give you a timeline, because I heard this on an IDF briefing earlier on. They believe that Rafah will be cleared out. Again, this is just words, but I believe it's okay if I share it with you. Rafah will be cleared out by May, and then from there, it will take around 6 months.
What do you mean by that?
Hamas, the 4 battalions inside of Rafah, of Hamas battalions, will be either they will have to surrender or they will be destroyed. And by the way, there's a lot of Hamas people surrendering right now. And then it's a long task between 6 months to a year of actually clearing out all the underground tunnels and clearing out those individuals who wish to regroup to fight with Hamas and Islamic Jihad again. The whole thing has to be demilitarized in order for there to be a
James, we're running out of time, I'm afraid, but thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's James Marlow, journalist and security analyst, talking to us live from Jerusalem. So my question to you for the rest of the hour is this. Has Netanyahu's government lost international support for this war now? And do you think that means we will see the fighting stop very soon? To which I would respond, yes, and then no. It's